Well, welcome everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming this morning. We hope that you're staying dry today in midst of this weather that we're having. I am Professor Justin Brown from LaGuardia Community College in the Graduate Center. This year, I'm serving as one of the 2023-2024 Leadership Development Fellows, working as part of the Faculty Affairs team within the central office. On behalf of our Teaching Matters series team, Laurie Watanabe Rose, Dominique Di Tommaso, Elena Copa-Chevili, and Wei Heng Tseng. I would like to thank Chris, Maritza, and Javier from Accurate Communication for providing our ASL CART services. We want to welcome you to the first session of this year's Teaching Matters workshop series. The purpose of the Teaching Matters series is a free one-hour summit of CUNY faculty and staff devoted to sharing knowledge, innovative student-centered pedagogy, and building community across CUNY. Each session is a focused, interactive, and engaged peer-to-peer workshop. These workshops are coordinated, supported, and promoted by the Central Office of Faculty Affairs. We are very excited to bring this series focused on AI to you and are thrilled by the overwhelming response that this series has received. Today's session, What is AI and What Can It Do?, serves as an introduction to AI, specifically some of its various forms and some of its functions, while also discussing the concerns and challenges, as well as AI's current uses and future possibilities. We are pleased to introduce today's workshop leaders. Andrea Fabrizio is the Associate Dean of the Office of Academic Affairs at Hostos Community College. Jack Kenigsberg is the Acting Coordinator of the Rockowitz Writing Center at Hunter College and Adjunct Lecturer in the English Department. And also Ruru Rusmin is Assistant Dean of the Office of Faculty Development and Instructional Technology at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. One note, please be aware that we will be using both the Q&A and chat boxes for this session. If you have a specific question, we ask that you post that in the Q&A, and please use the chat box for further comment and discussion. I will now turn things over to Ruru.
All right, thank you so much, Justin, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. If we could advance to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So it's really impressive to see such interest and engagement among CUNY colleagues around the topic of AI and how it affects us in higher ed. As you know, we asked you all to fill out a quick survey about your experiences and your expectations. And we saw from the results there's actually a wide range of familiarity with AI and the AI tools that we have access to. So we thought that it would be a good idea to start with some definitions to ensure that we're all on the same page and referring to the same thing before we delve into these gripping issues. So please bear with me if in these next few minutes we cover concepts that you might already know, or if you find some of these definitions imprecise, because we're aiming for a popular understanding and we may simplify or omit some technical points in favor of conveying core ideas and their implications. Our second little caveat is that there's so much to say about AI, and there's no way we'll even be able to mention it all in this hour or in the total 3 hours of this series. So we're sure that there are discussions going on in small groups, in your departments, in your colleges. So we hope that with this discussion, what we can do is open a window into like the AI landscape at CUNY and see what is present and what is possible. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. As promised, let's go ahead and start with some definitions. As you can see with the word artificial, AI is situated in contrast to the organic, and it aims to simulate the processes that are usually identified with human intelligence. You'll see on your screen here various technologies that have been used to enable the machines to perform tasks that's typically associated with human intelligence. So you'll see, for example, with AI applied to learning games and playing games. In the beginning, like the early systems would use rules, fixed rules to teach machines how to play these games and how to win at them. But as as research has advanced and as further developments have occurred, nowadays you'll see more like machine learning based systems that use algorithms so that the applications can learn from their experience rather than just depending on a fixed set of rules, but they learn from experience and make decisions based on that experience. We see things like pattern recognition and problem solving in autonomous vehicles that have to recognize the environment around them and then respond appropriately to the conditions, which we know doesn't always happen. And we see things like image detection, image recognition, motion detection, in things like proctoring software used to administer systems remotely. So the AI that's built into those is meant to identify whether a student is cheating. But as we know, those are also very problematic. So these are just some examples, some technologies, not comprehensive here, but all of these are still considered what we call narrow AI, right? And they're specialized to function just in these limited domains. And that's in contrast to general AI. So general AI, which is like human intelligence, can perform in an environment where there are few rules, few instructions, and where in a data poor environment. But for now, general AI is still theoretical and not achieved. All right, so we can move to the next slide. So we're talking now about within AI, we have a subset called generative AI. So again, the name tells it all, right? Generative means that it can create original content. Or if we were to say it less, with less anthropomorphization, we might say that it can produce output that has not yet existed in that combination before. So generative AI can produce this content without being explicitly programmed, but again, based on patterns and content that it learns from its training data. So a generative text model like ChatGPT can produce coherent and context-relevant text. A generative image model can create realistic images from scratch or modify existing ones. So for example, what I did want to show on the screen was an image that I created with generative AI. And the prompt that I gave it was, please create an image with a robot playing a violin on the banks of the Seine in the style of Monet. And that's kind of what it came up with. You say it's not great, but it's something, right? And it's interesting how it brings all this together. Generative AI is also used to create realistic speech, music, or sound effects. So I can't play this, but if you're interested, you should look up Johnny Cash singing Barbie Girl and singing rap in Johnny Cash style, which is really, again, very interesting and rather impressive in what it can do in the mimicry. All right, so let's move on to the next slide if we can and say, yes, we'll keep on going. So within generative AI, we want to identify large language models, right? So you can go ahead and show that bullet. Thank you. So large language models, you can see with the word large, that we're referring, for example, to large data sets. For example, OpenAI says that it trained GPT by scraping the internet, right? It's not only large data sets, but also large scale parameters, right? So it works with statistics and probability to predict what character, what sentence, what phrase might come next. But there are many, many layers of computation here, and there are algorithms to focus attention, to sort of set the context in order to refine the text. And these models are also fine-tuned before they're released, right? Fine-tuned with humans. And then they also improve, or they learn through a feedback loop with the interactions with users. So it's really easy to anthropomorphize these chatbots. And you'll hear or read people saying that it lies, it apologizes, it hallucinates. And it's particularly easy to fall into that because the ability to use language has long been a signal of intelligence. And also because of the way the interface is set up as a chatbot that you dialogue with. This leads us to sort of feel like it's a person that you're conversing with. But ultimately, it's important to understand that it doesn't know anything. It doesn't know what it's saying. And it's ultimately, it's what author Cory Doctorow calls a plausible sentence generator. And finally, the last term we'd like to define is prompt engineering. So prompt engineering, if you will advance the slide there, it should show up. So prompt engineering is refining your queries in order to achieve the result that you want from the AI. So prompt engineering is a matter of language choice, how you structure the query, what context and examples you might give it, and how you can fine tune with the iteratively with the results that it gives you. You can take a course in prompt engineering, and it's something that, you know, we've discussed whether it's something that our students need to learn. All right, so we could advance one more to the next slide. Again, these are just some basic definitions. And before we turn to discussing the effects and uses of AI in higher ed, we'd like to ask you to consider whether you feel like you've been through this before, right? Do you feel any deja vu maybe with like any other new technologies that have come around in the last years? Maybe the internet or mobile or social media. So what you see on the screen here is what we call is the Gartner hype cycle. It's about technologies that seem to like explode into our lives. And you know, they make this big impact, this big splash, and we have a lot of expectations, both positive and negative about them. But after that peak of inflated expectations, you know, reality, the limits of the technology, et cetera, sort of bring us down, bring the hype down, and sometimes even into the trough of disillusionment, as it says here. And after that, we can actually start to begin, or we can actually see more clearly, like, what are the uses of this technology? How does it, how can we use it productively until we reach a plateau of productivity where it just becomes part of our lives and we don't even think of it as a distinct technology? So, you know, we can think about, are we in this technology cycle? Where are we in this technology cycle? And what does that mean for our discussion and for our thinking about the future? And so with that, I'd like to pass things on to my colleague, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Ruru. I love that graphics. It's like Pilgrim's Progress sort of move through a hype cycle. So thank you so much. Can I have the slide for challenges and concerns, please? So that's coming up. So before, as Ruru mentioned, before our workshop, we wanted to send something out to all of you to engage you, right? Because we knew we were going to have a large audience, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to incorporate as many voices as possible into our workshop today. So we wanted to send that survey out to you, and it had two major kind of divisions to it. It was 4 questions, if you didn't get a chance to look at it. It asked about negative experiences you've had with AI in the past year and negative things you were anticipating in the year ahead. And then it also asked on the flip side for positive experiences that you've had with AI and positive things that you were anticipating for the year ahead. So we took a look at that. About 100 of you answered the survey. So we were able to get a sense of where everybody was coming to this workshop, where they were at. And what was interesting to us too, oh, thank you so much. What was interesting to us too was that so many of you said that you were coming today because you didn't really have a baseline of negative or positive, right? That you wanted to know more about it before you could say if you had a positive experience or a negative experience, and you really just wanted to learn more. So this is an important step in that. So to start off, I wanted to share with you some of the responses from the survey to give you a sense of where your colleagues are thinking of challenges and concerns, so that you'll think about where you fall in with what others are saying, and then we could talk about this a little more. There's going to be time at the end of the segment to hear from a few of you in the audience and also to ask some questions. So some of these are lifted directly out of the survey, word for word, and some are sort of summarized. I mean, not surprisingly, one of the main concerns that were raised in the survey was rampant attempts at cheating, right, and academic integrity. I know there's going to be a whole other workshop, the 3rd workshop, dealing with academic integrity. That's clearly on everybody's mind, right? And then the next 2 were about our students thinking, right? The reduction in critical thinking. A lot of you had concerns about that if we're using generative AI, what's happening to our students' critical thinking? How do we know if they're critically thinking? And I really like the next comment from the survey that someone wrote: students using AI instead of developing their own language and writing skills, and instructors not being able to assess their true skills and needs and provide useful feedback. Because that really speaks to the whole teaching and learning experience, right? So there's concerns about what the students are producing, and then also concerns about what instructors are able to do, right? If you don't know if that's what students have actually created, then how do you give feedback? Then how do you help the learning happen? And that was this comment really summed up a lot of the comments that were in the survey. There were also concerns about the dehumanization of the classroom experience. Many of you mentioned job losses. I know that also popped up in the chat just now. And someone raises a concern that the resistance to AI, right? That the resistance to it is a concern, to see it only as a threat and not as a tool, which is something that we'll be talking about in the next segment, as AI as a tool. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think there was one before it. Thank you. And then other concerns that came up that were common were concerns about biased or untrue information that students would get from generative AI, spreading of educational material that has errors or inconsistencies. There were concerns about bias, right, from the data set that AI is trained off of. And then also this final comment, students becoming props to AI, right? And are we, is there lived experience and interaction in that discussion of AI? So these are your voices. These are things that you said in the survey. And to give you an example of what AI does, if you can go to the next slide, please. Jack put the survey results into ChatGPT, and it summarized the survey results for us. So I thought it would be kind of fun and interesting to share with you how ChatGPT summarized what you said in the survey. So again, obviously plagiarism and academic dishonesty. And this was a summary that was generated. Respondents expressed concerns about plagiarism and academic dishonesty, and students using AI-generated content to submit their own work. This was a prevalent issue, right? So it pulled out that this was something that everyone was concerned about. And then two other things on the next slide, please. Which you saw in the examples that came from the survey: the impact on critical thinking and writing skills. Again, a significant number of respondents were concerned about the over-reliance on AI tools and how it would affect critical thinking and writing abilities. And then this is the third bullet point that was summarized about difficulty in identifying AI usage, right? How do we know, right? How do we know if what we're getting is our students' work? Can we detect AI? What do we do about this? So, you know, would you have been able to tell if this was not generated by a human? I'll leave that for you to think about. But this was generated by ChatGPT as a synopsis of what you entered into the survey in advance of the workshop. So and that will leads into the next section in a few minutes of what AI can do, right? Its possibilities and its potential. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So one of the points that was raised, can we detect it, right? And I'm going to pass it back to Ruru for a minute to talk a little bit about, are there ways to detect AI and the issues that raises? So Ruru, do you want to speak for a bit about that?
Great, thank you. I asked to speak to this a little bit because I wanted to talk about the CUNY context. But all right, you can see the three questions here. So can we actually detect the use of generative AI? So the success rate of the success rate that the AI generators tout is not always accurate. And so you'll see that OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, they released their own detector, but they actually shut it down, right? They shut it down because they said it was not sufficiently successful at detecting actual AI. The other tool that is commonly talked about is the AI detector that's in Turnitin, right? So Turnitin has it built in. It was turned on sort of by default for many schools, but at CUNY, we actually highlighted a series of concerns and we said, please do not turn it on by default, because again, they claim a very high success rate, but they actually had to backtrack and say it's not as successful as we initially said, right? So they lowered their success rate, and then there's still many questions about the accuracy of that actual success rate. So basically, does it actually work? Not so great, right? In addition, there are things that you can do once the generative AI text is created. You don't have to just copy and paste it there. right? So a user could take it and put it in another sort of AI application that will reword things for you, right? So, you know, there are many sort of ways to get around this. And so the other question that we want to raise is, if we want to sort of rely on detection, as you know, something comes up on the other side and we end up in sort of an arms race, a technological arms race, which has never really like succeeded very well. And finally, the big concern here is what happens to students who are falsely accused. So you may have read recently a study that showed that ESL writers are much more easily and incorrectly identified as having used AI to generate their text, right? And so it can be discriminatory, and it has a lot of implications for students who are falsely accused. There's a lot of trauma for them, and then, you know, they might come back and sue the university, which has happened in a few cases as well that you can read about if you like. And it also, you know, it also has a real negative impact on your relationship with the students, right? If you're accusing them of something and they need to defend themselves. And so the sort of mentality and the environment that it sets up is not great. So those are just some of the points, major points that I wanted to bring up about relying on detection as a strategy.
Thank you, Ruru. Can we go to the next slide, please? So with detection unlikely and problematic, as Ruru just described, right, what else do we do, right? And so these are questions, again, that are going to be addressed throughout this workshop series. Can we prevent students from using it, you know, or suggest they not, right, in some sort of statement on our syllabus? Can we embrace it? Is there a way to incorporate it into the work that we do in our classroom, in the way that we work with students? Is it a combination of these things? Is it situation dependent, right? These are the questions I think that we really need to work through, and that's why we're all here, right? So just to keep in mind that these seem to be the choices at this point, right, of what we can do with AI. Can we go to the next slide, please? So to navigate that choice, you know, in your classroom, are you going to embrace it? Are you going to prevent it? Are you going to try to detect it? Are you going to have a combination? You know, what do we need to know and do to be able to make that choice and to think through those questions? So think AI literacy clearly is important for us as well as for our students, right? And that's why I think this workshop was so popular, to learn about what it really is, what its capabilities are, and what it can do, right? And then we'll be able to better educate our students as we better educate ourselves. There's a lot of discussion about syllabus policies. And again, I know that's going to be covered in a later workshop. But it's unlikely, I think, that will be a one-size-fits-all syllabus policy, right? Because it's going to be dependent on the discipline, right, on the type of course. And it's something that really needs to be thought through for people to think about, you know, what is the role AI can play in my classroom, and what do I want students to be able to do or not be able to do with it. And as you know, the conversation about AI is evolving, the PD needs to be ongoing, right? Professional development never comes to a conclusion, right? So to have these ongoing opportunities to hear about what's developing, uses and concerns, because they will continue to shift and change. So we do need this. We need this ongoing PD. And I know, as will be discussed in the second workshop in the series, you know, this is really a challenge to us to rethink what we do in the classroom, right? The kinds of assignments that we're giving to students, the way we're assessing them, the way we're trying to engage them is not going to be the same, right? So to think about how to do that and how to have meaningful engagement with our students through different pedagogical practices is something we really need to think through as a academic community. So with that in mind, we're going to switch soon to talk about the uses of AI. But first, we have some members of our audience who were gracious enough in the survey to say they would be willing to speak a little bit at today's workshop. So we can go to the next slide, please. I hope you're all here. I know Cornelia Guest, Jacob Adler, and Lena Wu all said they would be willing to talk a little bit. So Cornelia, if you are here, please feel free to share a little bit with us your experiences with some and your concerns or apprehensions or experiences with AI. Is Cornelia here?
How are you?
Hi,
Nice
Cornelia.
to meet you. I'm teaching English 101 here and also at Naugatuck Valley Community College. So I've had assignments that have to be turned in. I teach on Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate for this class. So my students are virtual anyway. But what I found was the first assignment that I got were all of them were very similar. And that kind of raised a red flag, but I thought they weren't wrong. They were pretty good. The weird thing that I saw was that quotes, I wanted a quote from each essay. I had 2 essays I was having them compare. And out of 4 quotes, 3 of them would be incorrect. They were kind of close, but not correct. And I tried AI. I've got, Chat GPT, and I gave it the assignment. And it did the same thing where 3 out of 4 quotes were wrong. And I wrote back and I said, you've got wrong quotes, please fix. And they never got it right. And I noticed on my students' papers that they had a similar thing going on with the quotes. So there are little things that make you think, where did this come from? Because it didn't come from the essay. I don't know. I mean, I like the fact that it helps students see what's up, but a lot of them were missing bigger pictures. So maybe redesigning my assignment might be the way to approach this. Anyway, I don't know if you want more. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Jacob?
Hello, thank you. I'm Jacob Adler. I am the metadata librarian here at the Bronx Community College. Listening to Cornelia's spiel there, I'm reminded of a recent incident in which one of my colleagues in the library was in conversation with a professor who was using detection software because they had suspected that one of their students had written something using a generative system. And they were asking essentially, is this is this detection thing accurate, et cetera, because they were going to fail this student. And I got a hand of it, and then I said, well, let me try something, because they provided the text that they had used that they were detecting. I ran it, and in the AI detector that they had used for that assignment, it said, this was, there's 0% chance that this was, written by a human. And so I was curious. I ran it through a different detector, and then it said, well, this is 100% generated by a human. And then I ran it through a third detector, and it was like, well, this is 50% likely to have been generated by a human. So I used that as a point to illustrate some of the kind of unreliability of these detection things. And I think also the unreliability of using detection as the sole basis of determining whether or not something was used. I mean, I certainly think it can be an indicator, particularly if there are other factors which are suspicious about a particular piece of writing. But then, when I sort of chimed in on this, my thought process was, well, are there other pieces of this student's writing that you can compare this to? If you plug in your assignment prompt into a generative system, will it create something that is the same or similar? And all sorts of other things. I think that there's, as I sort of said in the chat, these chatbots are not necessarily concerned about what is correct. It's just about what sounds correct. And so the idea is that you always have to treat these, anytime you get an answer from one of these, the way I always describe it is that you have to treat it as if it came from some guy. And it's some guy that may or may not be correct, but it's a person you don't know, or a system you don't know, that is giving you an answer which, even though it sounds as though it may be legitimate, may not be. So that's sort of my 2 cents about that.
Great, thank you so much. And Lena, would you like to share a little bit? You're still muted, Lena.
Okay, I click unmute. Is that clear? Okay, good. So yeah, I'm from the VMCC and I'm teaching mathematics. So I see students use the chat GPT to help them solve the math problem, which is good because students can get the tutoring help immediately. But the other things is I find the student count on the AI technology too much, so they lost the connection with each other. Usually in person class, I arrange student to form in group, so they can solve the problem by discussion, and they can just get the critical thinking and get the peer support, just help each other. But since they rely on that online technology, so they interact with the technology, interact with machines so much, so they lost the social skill to communicate with each other. So my concern is that when they graduate from BMCC and to work in the workplace, there may be students are lack of skill in dealing with emotion intelligence problem, just know how to work with the people. So that's only one my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you, so much for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. And again, I think from all of your comments raises thinking about our classroom practices, right? How can we ensure that we're giving our students those skills, right? And then how do we make sure that they're aware of how to use this tool as well, right? So those are ongoing concerns, I think, that were shared in the survey and shared by all three of you. So thank you so much. I think we have a few minutes to pause for questions.
We have a question from Ruru started typing an answer, but I'm going to move to the next person, Jackie Darvin, excuse me if I butchered your name. What is being done to make sure that AI data sets are representative of diverse population and that linguistic diversity is incorporated into this language tools?
Well, I will say briefly that this is definitely an issue, and it's really has been highlighted. There are groups of people that are working on this and hitting on this theme. I'm not aware that we're doing anything. I'm sorry, let me go back. I'd be happy to share with you some of the groups that are working on that. I can't point specifically to anything that's happening at CUNY right now, but if there is something going on to specifically address this point, please let us know and we'll include it in our links of resources. But yes, it is definitely a concern. And I would say that if you attend the third workshop of this series, that is one of the topics, or rather one of the areas that will be covered in that third session.
Thank you, Ruru. Should we take one more and then we'll go on to the next segment?
It's 11:35. It's up to you.
So why don't we, we'll move to Jack's segment, and then we can take all questions at the end. Right. So we'll pass it on to the possibilities and uses of AI. Thank you.
Indeed. Awesome. So I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the more creative and generative uses of AI, and specifically using AI not as a replacement to human intelligence and ability, which is, I think, where so many of the fears of, not the fears, but really the legitimate concerns about plagiarism and academic dishonesty occur. Right, that's when students are using these tools instead of doing things on their own. But there are some areas where students, and quite frankly, anyone, including faculty, can use AI as complements to what their own capabilities, because there are certain things that human beings are just not going to be as good at as a computer. AI, as Ruru said earlier, AI is designed for pattern recognition. Humans have limited abilities to do pattern recognition very well. We're not as good at it as computers, and we never will be. There's also, human beings are subject to certain cognitive load limitations. There's only so much information we can hold in our heads at the same time, whereas a computer can hold nearly infinite amounts of information. And if it's running out of memory, you just add more RAM or more hard drive space, and then it can hold more. And finally, of course, AI. I mean, obviously, human beings can talk to other human beings, but AI, as Ruru said earlier, it's a chatbot interface, which is very different than a search engine. You can't really talk to a search engine or use a search engine for much except searching, but you can use AI in a lot of ways because you can exploit the fact that it's been designed to mimic human communication. So what I'd like to do really is then just go through a few examples. I don't know how representative these examples are, but I hope that they're examples that can give you some sense of some of the possibilities. So if we can move on to the next slide. Great. And so as Andrea said earlier, I took the survey data from our survey, which was 4 text questions, and I ran it through in ChatGPT. The survey data, I'm sure that many people here in the audience have run surveys, and certainly we've all taken surveys. And so most of us would understand, I think, that numerical data, Likert scales, are very easy for software to analyze. But text data is very difficult for software to recognize. It can't, like, Qualtrics or Excel can't really handle text data very well. We can, but it's tedious to comb through dozens, if not hundreds, of individual responses. But AI is really designed, large language models are designed for running through text. So Marika, if you can right-click that link and open a new window. Just open a new window, not a new tab, please. Thank you. Excellent, let it look. So I get chatty with chatbots sometimes, but I asked it if it could summarize spreadsheet data for me. And if you can scroll down quite a bit, because a lot of this is, the beginning is just me chatting with it. And it's still chatting, and I haven't provided any data yet. So scroll down a little bit further here. So here I just dumped in a column of like 60 or 65 responses. And it takes a while. So if we scroll, keep scrolling, sorry. And here's its answer. It started giving me, it summarized 65 responses with 30 bullet points, which is not helpful. So keep scrolling. I apologize, there's a lot of scrolling here. And so I asked it to do the 3 most common or salient ones, and it popped out 3, which is what you already saw because Andrea copied it into one of the slides. And then I did it again with the next column, the next set of information. Again, because it's a chatbot, it remembered I only wanted 3, and it gave me 3 responses. If you scroll down more, it gave me 3, which were some of the positives that people had seen. And we can click out of this. So we can X out of this, Mari, if you don't mind. We just close this window, and we can go back to the slideshow. There we go. Thank you so much. And I really want to give this example because I hope that this might encourage more of us to ask more open-ended questions in surveys. I think one of the reasons that we, when we're designing surveys, do not use open-ended questions very much, we use many more Likert scale questions, is because it's really difficult to analyze those text boxes. But ChatGPT or other AI gives us an ability to do a rough and ready analysis very, very quickly in moments. It's not the end all be all. We can't use it as a replacement for our own intelligence, but it gives us a starting point. We can then ask it if it found outliers. We can ask it, we can double check to make sure we agree with its summary. But it gives us an initial starting point where if you have hundreds of text answers, you'd be spending hours to get that initial sense of what the data shows you. So that is just one, I think, way that we, faculty, can use this. Can we move on to the next slide? Great. Another way, and this is something that I did last semester, is I used it in the classroom with my students to help them generate essay topics. Students, and not just students, many people have a difficult time connecting topic A to a seemingly very different topic B. And certainly students, when they're in a classroom, really learning something for the first time, and undergraduate students are always learning things for the first time. That's why they take our classes, right? If they're really immersed in trying to understand the material, it's very difficult for many of them to think outside the classroom. But that's often where the most interesting essay topics are, connecting what they're learning and working on understanding and mastering to something that they already have a lot of knowledge about. So it's hard for people, but it's very easy for AI because AI is, again, really, really designed to do pattern matching. So again, if we can just right-click that link and open a new window. Beautiful. So I teach linguistics, and I happen to love football. So I threw in just a really, wasn't even very chatty with it. I just saw the paper topics that combine any topic in linguistics and NFL football, and it gave me 10 topics. I would love to read these papers. I really would. I would like to write a bunch of these papers. Mind you, it is not doing the work for anyone. These are paper topics, but any student can get inspired by this to connect what I'm teaching them to what they know about. And then I made my students in class do the first half of this prompt, paper topics that combine any topic in linguistics, and a hobby of theirs, their major, their career ambitions. And I had students who generated topics on linguistics and baking blogs, linguistics and early childhood education, linguistics and jazz, because that's what they were interested in. And the papers were of varying qualities, but the topics were uniformly interesting. And I think that they were also invested in writing these papers because I was inviting them to actually bring the things that they loved into the class. So they were a lot less likely to want to cheat through this and replace their own intelligence with an AI's because they really wanted to write these papers. So if you can click out of this example and go back to the slideshow and move on to the next slide. And this is something that, another thing that you can do with students, and they can use AI as personal tutors. Ruru spoke earlier about prompt engineering, which is designing what you tell the AI to get at what you want. So there are two links here. One is a relatively simple prompt. Can we right-click the first prompt and open a new window? Yep, thank you. So the Pareto principle is that if you know the right 20% of something, you will understand 80% of the material. So again, I teach linguistics. I told it that I want to learn about linguistics, and I told it to tell me the most critical 20% that will enable me to understand 80%. That's the prompt. And the linguistics, of course, is an entire field, so it gave me an introduction to linguistics course outline. But this is, I teach introduction to linguistics. This is an introduction to linguistics textbook. Not necessarily the most helpful, but it's iterative. So can we scroll down? This past week, I was teaching phonology. So I said, what about phonology? And again, it knows that I'm asking for the 20% that will help me understand 80%. So it's sort of breaking down important concepts in phonology. And if you scroll down even further, my students had a really hard time with allophones. So I said, what about allophones? It started giving me more information about allophones. And I stopped here, but students are often overwhelmed by their textbooks and by lectures. And this can help guide them to create study guides of their own, help guide their own study. They still have to study, but this will help direct their energies in ways that are useful, that will help them understand most of what they are supposed to get out of the course. And can we click out of this? And then if they are able to do more advanced prompt engineering, they can actually get AI to be a private tutor. And I borrowed this prompt from a user named Lux_brush from Reddit. But can we click the link that says private tutoring, right click it and open the window? The prompt here is, as you can see, it's 2 very large paragraphs long. Part of it's really chatty, and I see we're going to make this a bit bigger. And again, I took this prompt literally word for word from the user Luxbrush on Reddit. And I asked it to teach me about phonology. It could be any subject. The second paragraph, the big paragraph, tells it I want one lesson at a time. I want it to break up complex lessons. I want it to ask me interactive questions. If I get an answer wrong, I want it to explain the answer to me and give me another question. And if you can scroll down, it gave me an introduction to phonology. This is lesson 1. That I've completed lesson 0 out of 10. It gives me learning outcomes. If we keep scrolling down a little bit, it gives me a very little bit of lesson, a very, very brief lesson. Gives me exercise, gives me an example of a completed task. I deliberately gave it the wrong answer. Like the task is to describe phonology. I defined something else. And it told me, if we keep scrolling, it told me that my definition was related to phonetics, but not phonology. So it clarified for me, told me to do it again. I did it again, and then it moved on. And so let's just click out of this, because I don't want to go through the entire thing. All of this will be available. I know people have asked about the slides. Yes, the slides will be provided with these links. And so can we go to the next slide and the final slide here? This is an important caveat. AI, as has already been said, is prone to hallucination. It doesn't always give accurate information. It gives information that sounds plausible, and therefore any user needs to fact check. So if we throw in survey data, we have to fact check it. We can't just assume it summarized it correctly. If students are using it as a tutor, they have to look at their textbook and read it to understand it and see if there are any discrepancies between what the AI is trying to tutor it in and what the textbook is saying. Part of this can be mitigated by regenerating a response or using 2 or more AI tools to compare the results. If 2 different tools are giving you the same basic answer, it's probably more correct. And if they're giving you wildly disparate answers, at least one of them is lying to you. But what I really, really wanted to do with these examples is just show you a range of uses that go beyond simply having it do work for you, and rather you and our students exploiting its capabilities to do work with it instead of for us. And I think we still have a couple of minutes to hear from some of the other colleagues here at CUNY who are doing some interesting things with AI. So if we could introduce Christina Kanopoulos and Marina Badillo-Diaz and Brett Weisel. And we can take down the slides for a moment and let's go to Christina first.
Hi, thank you. That was such a great presentation. Thanks so much, Jack. So much respect. I'm going to do some of these things with my students. So I recently walked students through plagiarism and academic integrity, and really wanted to connect them to why, their internal motivators for being honest, and really connecting them to their human intelligence and obviously lifting that up. But one of the things I'm doing also, and someone posted the flipping the AI assignment is to have ChatGPT generate a paper and then grade it together using our essay prompts. So we can walk together through all of the ways in which this paper sounds boring and uninteresting, right? Because it lacks that human element. But I put in the chat how I'm dealing with plagiarism and questions about academic integrity and prompts that helps students understand why they want to be honest and put their own work forward, and to tell me when they're using AI, what's working, what's not working, how they used it, what they used, and why.
So hi, I'm Dr. Marina Badillo Diaz, and I'm at the Silberman School of Social Work. And I am a big proponent of incorporating AI. I think a lot about 21st century skills of really preparing our students for the real world and work readiness. And our future workforce is definitely going to be incorporating the use of AI, and it already is. So I think a lot about the application specific to social work and social work practice. You know, I'm definitely redoing the assignments and thinking about how students can demonstrate their learning in different ways, using a podcast or creating a podcast or doing a verbal case presentation on one of their clients, thinking about the application of AI in the use of writing case notes or case presentations, and really think about those critical analysis skills, because you can't just simply just use what AI spits out and gives you. You really have to use that critical analysis skill. And so that's one of the ways that I'm really incorporating AI into really helping teach those critical skills and critical analysis with the use of AI in their assignment. So I did see in the chat, somebody talked about what chat prompts that they use. I'm definitely going to incorporate that more. But even for myself, like I'm teaching a class on grant writing and resource development. Just this past week, I used the use of AI to help write parts of the grant. And I just think about the same thing of using that with my students as well, because those future grant writers are going to be doing the same thing.
And Brett?
Well, I'm a big ChatGPT fan. I do encourage students I teach business classes. I encourage students to use ChatGPT in every assignment to help them brainstorm, to help them get feedback on early drafts, to maybe translate some words that may be difficult, or explain difficult concepts to them that maybe I didn't do a perfect job of explaining to them. I do ask them to use their own words. I do ask them to cite the large language model that they're using. And I've also, at the same time, I have seen a couple of cases where it really did look like someone was plagiarizing. And in one case, the student apologized, promised not to do it again. In the other case, there was no response. But I'm really making a big effort in redesigning all of my assignments so that the instructions are super clear, and so that the assignments are more relevant to their specific needs. I'm being very clear about, for example, what professional skills, what technical skills that employers really require are being practiced in the assignment, because I understand that a lot of reasons, some of the big reasons why students cheat or take shortcuts is because it's not so clearly relevant, and or the instructions aren't super clear. So that's where I've been really focusing my effort, and I've been using the tool like literally every day to help design the assignments, to put together bullets, multiple choice questions, illustrations. I had it help me do a little riddle that I used to start a class that rhymed, which is not something that I really could have done well on my own. So yeah, so it's I'm definitely pro ChatGPT.
We have only maybe 2 minutes, 1 minute left for Q&A. And the question, there's a lot of questions. I just want to let all the participants know that at the end of the session, we will be sending out the slides and we will have a recording. We'll post it up on the website. And then, so I guess I'll pick one question because we won't have any more time.
I think we should close, and unfortunately.
Okay, no problem, no problem.
Thank you, everyone. I have a couple of announcements about the future AI workshops and other events. Thank you all, and Jack, Ruru, and Andrea. Thank you so much for very super informative session. And we, as many of you know, there are 2 more sessions for this series: AI in the classroom and bias accuracy and ethical issues of AI. So sorry we weren't able to address all the questions you had, and many of them seem to be related to AI in the classroom and ethical issues. So please fill out this survey. It's in the chat to let us know what more you'd like to know. If you join our sessions in the future, you can address those questions. Please include, as you know, they're all sold out, so please include those questions in the survey. And also, I'd like to quickly announce that there are 2 other upcoming events. One is Learning Disruption and Recovery session, and the other is Disability and Accessibility sessions. And I'm going to include the flyers for those sessions. They'll be really informative, helpful also. So please join us. There are some seats available for them. On behalf of Faculty Affairs Office Support Group, thank you all for joining us. Hope you got some takeaways. I did. I learned so much from Ruru, Andrea, and Jack. So I hope we all see you again next month. Have a great Friday. Thank you, everyone.